Welcome back to another episode of the Kick and Cover podcast. As I was telling our guest, I have not done one of those in a long little bit. But since I got a special teams coach here today, or somebody who's fluent in special teams, I figured I would bring it back. Coach Joel Mathews is the new DC / assistant coach at Excelsior Springs High School out there in Missouri, by the Kansas City border there. Coach, how you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
No problem. Before we get into some of the special team stuff we're going to talk today, how did you end up as an assistant at Excelsior?
So kind of a long roundabout story, but ended up lost a state title game and got let go as an OC at my previous school. So ended up at my current one right there. So a little bit about with my background in general. I'm like a lot of guys that ended up as kickers and punters. I played soccer all growing up, had a high school coach who showed a little bit of interest in getting soccer guys out for football. So did that, then punted at Northwest Missouri State when Mel Churchman was there. Missed out on some of those national titles that they had though, but still had a great run of it there. And then met my wife when I was at school, and she was from the Kansas City area. So that's how I got down here. Haven't been able to break away, which it's fine. And then, like I said, I've been coaching here in the area for 18 years, and I've just been looking to help kickers and punters in the area and grow the game when I can, where I can.
Good. Now, kind of talk about that. Like, I mean, we talked a little bit about some topics, and we'll hit on a couple of them. I'm not going to ask you for the fundamentals of kicking and punting. I have other videos on that, and people can look that stuff up pretty easy. But I do want to ask you, and I'll kind of break down each of the three phases, like just issues you see typically that need fixed. Like, obviously, the head down thing is always the
that's the go-to
the go-to default comment. Like, let's start with like field goals and extra points. What are like the common issues you see with kickers in that realm?
I think some of it depends on the kicker, because you get, like, at the high school level, you get a wide range of abilities and what guys can do. For some guys, the thing that needs fixed is they need consistent rhythm with their steps. It's the jab step, the drive step, and then planting. Some of them are just so inconsistent with that. Some of that comes down to the snaps. You get the snaps taken care of. Those guys can be consistent with their steps. I would say the biggest issue that I see with guys and their consistency is their initial step. A lot of guys, when they go to kick, their steps aren't consistent, and they'll step at the ball with that first step. So if you're a right-footed kicker, a lot of guys, when they take that jab step with the left, they're stepping at the ball. And so when you step at the ball, what that ends up doing is it puts your plant foot in a wonky position. Sometimes your plant foot's going to be too tight to the ball, and so when you come through and swing, you can't get your hips through, and so you might come around the outside of the ball and push it to the left. Other times your hips, they can't swing through, they stay open, and you push it to the right. So the thing that I always look for, and I work with my guys first, is that initial jab step. You have to go with the plant foot spot. So you have to understand where your plant foot will be, and then you step at that spot. And when you step there, that allows your leg to swing naturally and your hips to be on target when you come through and make contact with the ball. So, and that's something too, even as a coach, if you're not very familiar with kicking and how it works, that's a simple thing to look for. Just look at that guy's first step. And if he's going at the ball, it's probably a good bet it ain't going to go through. And so you can simply tell them, hey, go to the plant foot spot. And then the next question that I often get is, well, where is the plant foot spot? How do I know that? So for a typical high school kid, most high school kids will be kicking off a 2-inch block or a 1-inch block. There's not too many guys, especially in my area and at my level, that kick off the ground in high school. So if you're kicking off a 2-inch block, then your plant foot, so if you can, imagine where your foot's at, where your big toe joins the actual foot, that giant knuckle right there, that part of your foot should be even with the ball when you go to plant your foot off a 2-inch block. If you're kicking off a 1-inch block, you scoot your foot further up and the block will be even with your midfoot. And then to find the distance from the ball. So imagine like you've got your block here, you take your foot and your plant foot spot is about 1 foot length away from where the block is. And that's a good starting point for most guys. So that's the spot that people want to step at. So as a coach that doesn't have, if you don't have any background in kicking, if you can tell your guys, hey, approach the plant foot spot, and then you watch where their plant foot lands, then like just even those two little things right there are going to be able to clear up a lot of the consistency issues and get guys striking the ball fairly well.
Okay. Now, let's continue from there. What about kickoff kicking? To me, that's the place where, especially to get distance, but obviously you need height with it too for your coverage team.
Mm-hmm.
But like I think that's the area that I've seen high schools struggle the most with is kickoffing portion. That's why I think you see a lot of schools do either a crap ton of squib kicks or
Mm-hmm.
the onside theory. So what do you commonly see as an issue there?
I see where I'm at with what I get to work with is I don't have guys that can consistently put it in the end zone. So we fall into that. I teach a lot of the squib kicks, sometimes the sky kicks, those types of things. But if you have a guy that you feel can develop into that and that you really want to work with that, once again, like going towards the plant foot spot, making sure the plant foot's in the right spot on contact is huge. And then the other thing with kickoffs, it's about speed. You want to get as much speed to the ball as you can. So the faster you can swing your leg, the further the ball's going to go. And that's where that speed to the ball. It's essentially like after the first couple of steps, it's basically a sprint to the ball, maybe like a 5-yard, 6-yard acceleration to the ball. And then in order to transfer that speed, not just to the ball, but get it through the ball, that's where we want to add the hurdle technique. If you watch college guys, NFL guys, when they do kickoffs, they swing that leg violently through, and then it almost looks like they're about ready to stumble or fall on their face. And that's because they're bringing that momentum through the ball, and then their plant foot is going to hurdle. So I'm assuming most coaches have seen a track race where guys are running over hurdles, and that trail leg, when they come over the bar, it's parallel and then comes down. That's essentially what you want to do on that kickoff. You want to swing your kicking leg through, and then your plant leg, in order to bring all that momentum through the ball, is going to come over an imaginary hurdle, and you keep that momentum going forward.
Okay. Not perfect, coach. And then obviously the last of the three kicking phases, which I'd argue is kickoff is important. And extra point is, but I'd argue punting is probably the most important of the three, in my personal opinion. But what about punting? Like that, because we've struggled the past 2 years consistently finding a decent punter and teaching it. What are your experiences on areas where to improve?
With punting, a lot of it starts with at any level, NFL, college, high school, all of it. It's in the drop. It's where the ball is in your hands, and then what happens when it leaves your hands. And getting guys to be able to be consistent with that, that's going to lead to the ball coming off your foot consistently and getting the types of punts that you want. So, wish I had a football here with me. When I work with guys and we teach them, what we're looking for is when you have that ball, you want it out away from your body. You don't want to, yes, you have to be able to use your elbows as kind of shock absorbers to catch the snap. So you don't want to just smack it off our hands, but then the ball has to get out away from your body. Because what's happening with that is if the ball's not away from your body, when you go to drop it out of your hand, then it's not going to get to your foot. You'll probably end up kicking it off your ankle, shanking it, and that's not going to be what we want. So we want to get that ball away from the body. That the arm is almost totally extended. There's just going to be a little bit of give in that elbow. When we hold the ball, so for me, I'm right-footed, but I'm left-handed, which is funny. But you hold the ball. Some guys will hold it more with their hand on the side, hand underneath. For that one, I've always been, if you're comfortable with it and it works for you, I'm not going to tweak it very much. We're just going to go with what you've got there. So you'll have your hand there on the ball, and then as you're taking your plant step, the guide hand's going to come off, and then simply all you do, and the way I teach it, is you just open up your hand like you're going to go shake somebody's hand. So like if you've ever met somebody, like you extend your hand, you open it to shake it. That's all the drop is when it comes out of the hand right there. And when the football drops, we want it level. So as a coach, if you're watching it, if that when it comes out of their hand, if the nose drops, if the nose is up, those are issues. We want it straight level. So it should be able to stay level as it hits the ground. The nose is going to be slightly in, just a little bit. It's not going to be, whenever it comes out of your hand, it'll automatically just turn in a little bit. But if it's too far in or too far out, that's where we're going to have issues as well. So as a coach, if you're watching the drop, you should see it level, and you should see it with the nose just turned ever so slightly in. And what that does actually is it allows, when the ball comes off your foot, it allows it to start spiraling and look like an actual thrown pass. So with that, just getting guys to drop the ball consistently and point the toe. Like those two things, if you can work the drop and point your toe, that'll get you a long ways, especially if you're really struggling.
Now, you are obviously, and we kind of talked a little bit that you're a big shield punt person. First, I'll ask you why the shield punt. Why is that your preferred method, especially at the high school level? So let's start there.
So we actually, at my old school, I ran this punt for about, what was it, about 10 seasons. And we used to do like the typical NFL spread punt, where snapper has to be in the protection. We got to a state title game in 2009, and we gave up a couple of giant punt returns that really hurt us in that game. I think we ended up losing 31-14. And two of those scores were set up by some pretty long punt returns where the only people in the picture when the guy caught it were our two gunners. And so at that point, we realized something has to change. And this was when that shield punt was just kind of becoming a thing. University of Missouri was doing it. So we were fortunate enough to be able to go down and learn from them. And the big thing for us was to be able to get more guys into coverage. And also, we weren't sure that the snapper that we had coming up the coming year was going to be able to snap and block effectively too. He was a great snapper, but then you throw in the blocking, and it was going to be a little bit of an issue. So that's why we ended up going to the shield punt.
Okay, and so like let's talk a little bit more. But I've seen multiple ways of how to teach it. Like some people use a zone scheme, some people use a count scheme, some people count inside out, some people count outside in. Like everybody's got a different method on, I think, how they approach it, and from how they approach personnel. How do you approach the protection aspect and your personnel for it?
I think we're a little bit different than most people in that we wanted to find a way to get our fastest and best tacklers out on the field. One of the things I disliked with the initial shield was having the big O lineman, D lineman type in the shield like that. It's like, okay, we want coverage, but yet I got three guys that I would never otherwise have in coverage out there. So we wanted to find a way to get away from that. And we also wanted to find a way to make things easy for our dudes too. Like we have always been along the lines of if you can keep it simple, then your guys don't have to think and they can just play. So what we do with we actually had two punts. We had just a regular middle punt and we had a rugby punt. So we're always snapper and then three dudes on each side of the snapper and then three in the shield. So if we were rolling to the right, then the right side, what they do, they don't even have to count. And this is the beauty of things, is you're blocking down, and you're blocking down on the guy in your gap to head up. So if there's no guy in your gap, then you can block head up. If there is a guy in your gap, then you're blocking him. If you got two guys in your gap, you're blocking the guy closest to you. And we called it a pinball technique, where you're basically trying to block that guy and push him or pinball him into the other one to just knock him off balance. And it was a 3-step technique. So if I'm on that right side, then my first step is with my left foot. I'm flat down the line. By my second step, I'm probably making contact. And then on my third step, I'm extending and I'm pushing as violently and hard as I can, sticking that foot in the ground and releasing into coverage. So all we were looking for on those down blocks was just enough to knock the guy off balance, so that way he doesn't get a free run at the shield. On the back side of it, those guys are all ripping and running. So now you're going to try and rip across the guy furthest from you in your gap. So your first step's going to be with that right foot, and it probably end up bubbling back a little bit. And then second foot, we're basically turning the shoulders. And then third step, we're taking that inside arm and we're ripping through as many people as we can. My shield in the back, they're not numbering either. I called them a snowplow. So the three of them, once the snap happens, they're getting shoulder to shoulder. And what they're doing is they're moving as one. They're basically like one snowplow that's moving out to the guard. That's kind of their aiming point, the outside foot of the guard. Move that way and slightly downhill as you're going. And then their number one job, don't get split. So you're protecting the inside seams is the key thing right there. And then the punter, as he gets it, he's going to catch, step once with the right, and then he's on his fourth step coming downhill, balls out.
Yeah. Well, two things there. What typically, I mean, do you have a set? Obviously, you mentioned step stairs, but time. Like that's always been my question with like a rugby shield is there's obviously some it's based off pressure. I get that, but is there like a standard old punt? You have a snap to kick ratio that obviously to prevent getting it blocked. Do you have that? It's more of a rugby shield punt.
No, we never. It's one of those things, to be honest with you. Like I was a punter in college, and I had a feel. Like I just had a feel for how fast things should be. And with the rugby punt, it's maybe just a touch slower, but not much at all. And really, like when we practiced it, what we could tell, if you have a dude that's able to come through the A gap on the backside, then it's one of two things. Either that guy's not ripping across, or we're a little bit too slow on things. But no, like I don't have like a snap to kick time that I went. It was more based off of feel, and it really shouldn't be much slower than what a normal punt operation is.
Okay, I was curious. Now you mentioned rugby punting there too. How do you approach rugby punting? Because I've seen some schools that are really good at it, and then I've watched other coaches try to teach it, and they struggle teaching it. So how do you? One, what does it change for you in terms of, does it change anything for drop from when you drop base punting? And then two, how do you teach the rugby punt?
So what part of the reason why we really liked it too is because we didn't always have a dude that was comfortable sitting back there and dropping bombs. So with this rugby punt, our big thing was if you put it out on the numbers, we're good. I literally don't care what it looks like. Like it can be one that barely skims over the top of the shield, goes 20 yards in the air and bounces for another 15. Fine by me. It did the job. It's out on the numbers. It can be one that you get a hold of it and it's 40 yards, 4.2 hang time, whatever. So I didn't worry too much about the drop as long as my guy is able to consistently put it on the numbers. The key thing with that I would watch for though is their aim. So that last step when they plant their left foot right before they kick, that left foot needs to be pointed where we want the ball to go. And so a lot of times what you see with some guys that struggle with the rugby punt, especially if they're used to the drop back, is that last step, they like to turn that foot inward and kind of square their body. And then they end up swinging across their body and sending the ball to the middle or wherever we don't want it. Because like when we rugby, we're definitely trying to get it to, a specific spot.
Okay. And then last thing I wanted to talk about, let's talk about how you teach coverage. I mean, you mentioned it when we talked, you called it net coverage. And I think I have a good idea what you're referring to, but explain if somebody or just also to make sure our verbiage isn't off, but maybe somebody doesn't know what net coverage and coverage is, what it actually is.
So this one we got from Coach Tabor, who at the time he was the special teams coordinator for the Browns. He's a Kansas City native. He came back. He was doing a clinic, so picked it up from him. It is by far one of the easiest things that we've had to teach. Something that kids understand. We get a lot of defensive kids on our special teams, and the net coverage is basically about finding your fit. So you've got 3 guys on each side of the snapper. Those 3 guys are each a half of the net. And their job then is to come together as one net and squeeze the returner. So on the right side, we got 3 guys there. Whoever's the first man down, he's heavy on the ball, meaning he's going to put his inside shoulder on the outside shoulder of the returner. The next guy is the force player. He's going to find his fit off of the heavy player, and he's going to be far enough back that that he can't get split, and he's going to be far enough outside that the guy can't turn the corner on him. So it's kind of like for where those guys are, we don't teach like a set distance back or to the outside. It's an ability fit, meaning you can't let them, turn the corner on you, and you can't get split. So you got to find where that zone is for you. And then our third guy down, we call him contained. So it's heavy force contained. So the contained player finds his fit off the force player. So that's half the net. And then the other half is doing the same thing. And those 2 heavy players are squeezing the returner. And we want to force that returner to run laterally. And so that's how we teach it. And when we break it down on film and you watch it, it's an easy concept to get the kids to understand on film, and to even coach up on film and see where the breakdowns are. Because you can clearly see, like, hey, like, you're obviously the second guy down. You see Johnny there in front of you. He's the heavy player. So you need to find your fit off of him. You can't be stacked behind him, because now if that guy goes laterally, he can definitely turn the corner on you. So it was something that it was much easier to identify and break down on film. Because sometimes, like, if you give kids assigned lanes to run through, so I gave a kid an assigned lane, but he wasn't there because he got held up. And now I have another kid who's, supposed to be in an assigned lane. Does he stay in his lane, or does he fill for his buddy? What's the message we're sending there? With this one, it was simple. It's like, there's no force player, you're it. You got to fill it. You got to find it. Our shield guys, they were my net fixers. So my left shield and my right shield, as they're coming down, they're looking for holes in the net and they're filling. My snapper, he was always hot to the ball. His only job in life was to get a great snap back to our punter. And anything he did after that was an absolute bonus. A lot of the times we were fortunate enough to have a guy that was athletic enough to be able to sprint down and be one of the first ones on the tackle. The best, I need to go back and find this, but we had one year, my snapper, he had tweaked his knee the week before, and I didn't have a backup snapper. And I looked at him, on the Thursday walkthrough. I'm like, hey, can you just walk out there and snap? And like, after you snap, you can just stand there. Like, can you at least, are you good to do that? He's like, yeah, I can snap. And so it's on film where he snaps, and then he literally just stands on the line of scrimmage, and the guy who's over top of him is just standing next to him too. Like, they're both like, what do we do? And then we make the tackle, and then he just walks off. So, I mean, that saved our bacon that game. But I kind of point to that as another reason we do it. Like, the snapper, all he has to do is snap, and anything else is a bonus. So I think it plays into a lot of high schools, personnel's hands right there too.
Okay. Just last thing I want to ask you, do you have any, I don't know, tips, tricks, anybody who teaches kicking? Like I said, obviously not every school has somebody who's experienced kicking. I think that's a luxury. Especially if you get somebody who's kicked in college. But do you have any tips or tricks for maybe a staff who doesn't have anybody with that experience?
I will put in a shameless plug for what I do here at this point. So my Twitter handle, it's Headcase Kicking. We call it Headcase Kicking because, you hear the mantra, kickers are head cases. Well, okay, let's embrace it. Let's live with it. So I put stuff out on there about how coaches can help others, but there's also a website, headcasekicking.com, and we have available on-demand videos where it takes you through the basics of kicking field goals, the steps, the approach, how to make contact, what to listen for, what to look for. on stuff, drills that you can do to correct things or to work on, accuracy. Um, that's a simple resource that can be used to just learn more about kicking in general. Um, I would say, like beyond that, just learn some of the basics. Find somebody who's successful, who's done it, and ask them about things. I think the things that we hit on earlier, approaching the plant foot spot and like keying in on that, that would be probably the number one thing for both kickoffs and for field goals is as far as finding consistency. Um, it just don't don't get intimidated by all the jargon that's out there with some of these guys too. Like there's some great coaches out there, and I think you and I know this too. You know, being able to do something is not the same as being able to communicate something. And the best coaches are able to effectively communicate things in ways that people can understand them and apply them. So if you're going to go out and look for kicking resources or talk to people who've done it, find somebody who's a good communicator.
Yeah. Well, coaches, his Twitter will be in the bio. So make sure you give him a follow. If you got any questions, you can reach out to him that way. Like, share, and subscribe. Otherwise, that is another episode of the Kick and Cover podcast.